Good morning, girls, and this morning your work for English is going to involve marking the work that you've already done on this poem, The Sea by James Reeves. So I hope you've got your work in front of you. Please pause my video wherever you need to check that page before going on to the next. It's really important that you learn from this. I have noticed some people, when they've shown me the work they've marked, they've merrily ticked their answers when I can see quite clearly that they are wrong. So make sure that you read the answer. Don't just assume that what you've done is lovely. That way you're not learning anything. Read it carefully, see what your answer says, what my answer says, and where I got my from, and learn from it. Right, now the first stanza was this one, and if you remember in the poem we are comparing the sea to a dog. We're using the metaphor all the way through the poem, which means it's an extended metaphor because it's extended all the way through, of the sea being like a dog. So in the first stanza you are asked to describe the dog based on the first stanza, and that's quite a straightforward question, and I've been asked for 5 things about him. In fact, as you can see, I've got 6. You don't need to have all 6. As long as you've got 5, any 5 will do. The sea is a hungry dog, giant and grey. He rolls on the beach all day with his clashing teeth and shaggy jaws. So we can see in the first line he is hungry. He is giant, which means he is huge. He is grey. That he rolls on the beach, well, that's really not describing the dog, I suppose, so perhaps that's the one I would leave out. He has teeth which bite. We've got that with clashing teeth. I say chut hard. And shaggy jaws. Shaggy means that he's got long fur, but again, that reference to his jaws, his strong mouth. And the next question is, how could this also refer to the sea? You were asked what the mood of the sea was, and pick out the words which show this. The challenge was finding the specific words. This is really where you're seeing where dog and sea work together. So we could say the following: the sea is also hungry. And how's the sea hungry? It swallows things up. People, objects, whole ships just get swallowed up and disappear, almost like going into its stomach. It always keeps taking more and more, so it doesn't ever stop and say, I'm full now. It'll keep going. It's giant, it's also vast. As you know, the sea goes on, and it is frequently grey. It's not always grey, but it's grey on miserable days. We know that he rolls on the beach all day. The sea rolls on the beach, and the waves come in, they roll on, and the waves often, we're told, it rolls on the beach with clashing teeth, and here is when the waves crash onto the jagged rocks, rather like teeth shutting with a clang, with that crash you'd hear with the sound of the sea on it. If you've ever been to the beach and seen that, or if not seen it in films, you will have known what we're talking about. And it has shaggy jaws. So like the dog, the foam is a bit like the shaggy fur. If you look back at the previous picture here, I chose a picture of a dog which rather similar in colour to that, and a very woolly, shaggy looking dog that one was. Now, the more difficult bit was talking about the language. The poet uses onomatopoeia, do you remember that? For the word clashing, it sounds like clashing. And it's not enough just to say, oh, he uses onomatopoeia. Why? He creates the terrifying sound of the waves breaking on the rocks. Equally, he uses alliteration with sh, clashing teeth, shaggy jaws. So you got the sh, and that is the sound often of the waves as they're coming in on the beach. or the foam in the air. Right, now the mood. Now looking at the words that were chosen there, you begin to get the feeling of the mood. Why is it a grey sea and not a lovely sparkly blue one? Because grey is a bit more depressing, isn't it? It rolls on the beach. Well, yeah, it does that in good weather and bad. But here we've got clashing teeth. And the word teeth straight away makes us feel a little bit frightened, particularly with jaws. We can imagine a powerful dog's jaws grabbing us. That's the dog's mouth. So we are beginning to feel, and there the word is ominous. Ominous means threatening or frightening. If you don't know that word, learn it, because it's a very useful word to have. And then I've explained why I think that the mood in this is ominous. It feels as if a storm is brewing, and as the waves crash and splash onto the beach. The grey tells me there's no sun. The image of the clashing teeth is frightening, and the presentation of the sea as a living thing is threatening. You know, this idea of it being hungry and giant, I'd be frightened it's a bit like a great big giant after me to eat me. And that picture is picked up in the next stanza in particular, which we're going to go on to. But there, the repetition of teeth, jaws, hungry, grey makes me scared. And those are the words I'd pick out particularly. You must always have evidence. If you said it feels frightening, why? That will get you the good marks. That'll get you the high marks. Hour upon hour he gnaws the rumbling, tumbling stones, and bones, 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 the giant sea dog moans, licking his greasy paws. Now the questions I've got is, why does a poet compare the sea to a dog chewing a bone? Now obviously the word is in gnaws. And gnaws is when a dog, if you've ever watched a dog gnawing something, it just lies there in my picture and chews and chews and chews. And it takes a long time because the thing that it's chewing is probably hard. But over a while, suddenly there's nothing left on that bone. And equally here, how do we get the sea gnawing? What does it gnaw? It gnaws the stones. How does it do that? It's erosion, isn't it? So the sea gnaws at the stones each time the waves roll over them and wear them down. It takes a long time, erosion. What techniques is the poet using with rumbling, tumbling? Now you can hear straight away, can't you girls, that there's rhyme, but they're right next to each other within the same line, so we call that internal rhyme. Rhyme normally at a poem is the ends of lines, like moans and stones and bones, but when it's inside the same line, it's internal rhyme. And onomatopoeia, rumbling, sounds like rumbling, tumbling, sounds a bit like it. And the effect is he's created the sound and the movement of the water. And why does the sea moan? Well, to me, moaning is a miserable, lonely, long sound again. And moan is onomatopoeic. Do you see how I've got onomatopoeic, which is the adjective, from the noun onomatopoeia? All I've done is I've changed the A into a C. It's exactly the same spelling. And it creates the noise of the waves coming in, woo, woo, woo. And I've said, I think it sounds unhappy. Right, I think also, although I didn't ask you, we've got some questions about that last line there, licking his greasy paws. I wanted to have a look at that whole stanza a lot more, because I think there's a lot more going on. This was the easier question, basically understanding how this whole thing is working with a little bit of form, technique there. But now it's a more difficult one, the intention, why. Now I've said, how does he make the sea sound menacing? Now, for a simple answer, you should have these things as your key points. He uses the word gnaws. He repeats the words bones, 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 which makes us think of death, doesn't it? And licking his greasy paws, I think is menacing because it sounds like he's just had a delicious meal, which is why he's all greasy over his paws. But now he's still ready for some more. He wants more, doesn't he? Because he's still hungry. More, more, more. Now, for those of you who got those quite easily, and I know some of you would have, because you are quite good at poems, but this is for those of you who got them quickly, and it's an answer for those who are really good. If you struggle with that, or you feel that's as far as you can go, fine, don't worry about this. But if you can, this is a longer answer. The poet builds on the mood already created in the second stanza. Remember in the second stanza we said it was miserable, it was depressing, it was ominous, frightening. Now he's building on that. Third stanza is even more scary in a way. In this stanza, the sea is described as a terrifying dog which gnaws on its stones. The waves roll onto the beach, wearing down the stones lying there. We said that earlier, but I've incorporated it into this longer answer. The repetition of bones reminds us of death, and the many people drowned at sea. The image of licking his greasy paws is frightening as the sea is enjoying the suffering. Oh, give me bones. It is a reminder of the number of people already swallowed by the sea. Moans as onomatopoeia, capturing the misery. The adjective giant reminds us of an ogre eating humans. So in the beginning of the poem, if you remember, we had giant, and here in this one, the giant sea dog. We can't escape this thing. It is too big. And when the night wind roars and the moon rocks in the stormy cloud, he bounds to his feet and snuffs and sniffs, shaking his wet sides over the cliffs, and howls and halloos long and loud. Right, now the weather, what is it? It's stormy, I'm sure you got that. We got the word itself in the second stanza, the stormy cloud. How do we know? Well, we know that the wind is roaring. I also think that the howls and halloos is like the wind howling around. It could also be the water, the sound of the water, but it's very loud. The verb roars, the wind roars, tells us that it's very windy. The clouds are stormy and seem to rock the moon. You know, the moon never moves, does it? It looks like it's moving because of the sorry, I lie, it does move. That's a shocking, all you scientists are howling with shock. But you know what I mean, it's much more steady. It's the clouds that come in front of it that make it look like it's rocking backwards and forwards. It does move, of course, it does across the sky, but it doesn't rock. Now the waves are high and wild as they smash on the cliffs. I know that because it says it shakes its wet sides and howls and halloos. Next question is, sorry guys, I'm going to have to cough. There, me. How does the poet make the sea sound like a dog in the stanza? Give evidence from the poem. Right, we've got the, oh dear me, the sea bounds to his feet, doesn't he? He bounds to his feet in the third line. That, in fact, is the waves leaping around. And here the waves are rough. And the foamy water's like a dog shaking his wet fur. So we've got the shaking his wet sides over the cliffs. And that's all the foam that's flying in the air. And it also howls loudly like a dog would. And what technique is being used here? With this line, snuffs and sniffs. We've got the same technique with howl and hellos. This is alliteration, isn't it? The repetition of sna, sna, and ha, ha. And then the onomatopoeia, which is the sound making it, is the howl and hello, which sounds like it, doesn't it? Last stanza. But on quiet days in May or June, when even the grasses on the dune play no more their reedy tune, with his head between his paws, he lies on the sandy shores. So quiet, he scarcely snores. Now you can feel even the way, I changed the way I read it, but that's because the words make me slow down. They are quieter, they are softer. How has the mood changed in the final stanza? Well, you can see it's now calm and gentle. How do I know that? Well, firstly, the word quiet is repeated again and again, isn't it? On the first line there, quiet days. And then at the last lines of the poem, so quiet, so quiet. So he really is trying to emphasize that it is quiet. May and June, if you know, are sunny months. I'm sure you all do know that. And there's no wind, generally. April is a windy month. So on this particular day, there's no wind, okay? So the grasses do not play their reedy tune. That would be the sound of the wind blowing through the grasses which are growing on the dunes. Do you see those sand dunes in my picture there? It is so peaceful, there's no activity at all, like a dog asleep who plays no more. The water seems to be still, it could almost be asleep. A reedy tune is a very quiet little sound. And we've had all that roaring wind and the rain and the storms, and now we can't even hear the quiet rustle of grasses. Can you see that? Where we can't even hear that. The water seems to be so still it could be asleep, like the dog with its head between its paws. And the last line is separated from the rest. There's a break. I think that slows the reader right down. So we really are quiet by the end of the poem. But also it's like checking the dog's asleep and you don't want to disturb him. If you've ever had to creep away from a baby that's been screaming and howling and it's finally settled, you creep away quietly. You don't want to wake it all up. And there's this idea there. I think it's also giving the idea of the waves coming in very, very slowly onto that shoreline. Okay, girls, that is your poem. Mark it all, take it slowly, and look for the key things if you want to really get high grades in English in future. Enjoy your day. Goodbye.